Commander Zeth Ka had seen death across 1,000 worlds. As a Galactic Federation battle observer, his role was simple: watch, record, and report on the combat effectiveness of new species joining their ranks. In his 3 centuries of service, he had cataloged the fighting styles of over 40 different races: the Krathen, with their crystal armor that could deflect plasma bolts; the Vorthak, who could regenerate lost limbs mid-battle; the Kelrani, whose telepathic coordination made them move like a single organism. But nothing had prepared him for the humans. The briefing had been standard. A new species from the Outer Rim, recently discovered, showing promise in preliminary assessments. They called themselves humans, and came from a world they named Earth. The Federation Council was considering them for military alliance. Pending this combat evaluation on the war-torn planet of Kepler 442b. Zeth Ka adjusted his observation equipment as he settled into his concealed position on the rocky outcrop overlooking the battlefield. Below, the Zarathi horde spread across the valley like a living carpet of death. 30,000 of the galaxy's most feared warriors, their black carapaces gleaming under the twin suns. The Zarathi had never been defeated in direct combat. Their exoskeletons could stop most energy weapons, and their acid spit could melt through battle armor in seconds. Against them stood barely 300 humans. Zeth Ka checked his readings twice, certain there had been an error. The numbers made no sense. Even the mighty Krathen wouldn't engage such odds. This wasn't a battle. It was suicide with witnesses. The human commander, a female with graying hair and scars across her face, stood before her troops without any visible fear. She wore simple armor that looked primitive compared to Federation's standard issue. No energy shields, no plasma weapons, no regeneration fields, just basic kinetic firearms and bladed weapons that belonged in a museum. "Today, we stand on alien ground," the commander's voice carried across the wind. Zeth Ka's translator rendered her words into his native tongue. "We're outnumbered, outgunned, and according to every tactical analysis, we're about to die." Several humans actually laughed. Zeth Ka's appendages twitched in confusion. Perhaps their translation software was malfunctioning. "But here's what those analyses don't account for," the commander continued, raising an ancient-looking rifle. "We're humans. We've been fighting impossible odds since we climbed down from the trees. Our ancestors faced cave bears with pointed sticks. They crossed oceans in wooden boats. They split the atom and walked on their moon before they invented decent coffee." More laughter rippled through the ranks. Zeth Ka began to wonder if this species suffered from some form of collective mental disorder. "The Zarathi think they know death." The commander's voice grew harder. "They've never met anything that refuses to die properly. They've never fought something too stupid to know when it's beaten. Today they learn why even death itself learned to fear the human race." The humans began to move. Not the coordinated march Zeth Ka expected, but something more primal. They spread out in loose formations, each soldier moving with individual purpose while somehow maintaining unit cohesion. Their weapons were a mixture of technologies, from primitive slug throwers to modified energy rifles. Some carried blades that looked hand-forged. The Zarathi attack began as it always did, a thunderous charge that shook the ground. Their war cries pierced the air as 30,000 warriors surged forward like a tsunami of death. Zeth Ka had seen this charge break the spirits of entire armies before the first shot was fired. The humans opened fire. Their weapons cracked and boomed with primitive chemical propellants, launching metal projectiles that shouldn't have been effective against Zarathi armor. But somehow, impossibly, the aliens began to fall. The humans weren't just shooting, they were placing every shot with surgical precision, finding gaps in carapaces, targeting joints and weak points with an accuracy that defied probability. A Zarathi warrior broke through the line, its claws reaching for a young human soldier. The boy couldn't have been older than 20 standard cycles. Instead of retreating, he stepped forward, deflecting the claw strike with his rifle barrel while driving a knife into the creature's throat. The Zarathi died, but not before its acid spit caught the human across the chest. Zethka watched the boy's armor dissolve, the acid eating through to flesh beneath. By all logic, the soldier should have fallen, should have died from shock and injury. Instead, he grabbed the Zarathi's own weapon and kept fighting, even as smoke rose from his wounds. This was impossible. The human was obviously dying, his life signs failing according to Zethka's sensors, yet he moved with the same deadly efficiency as before. More impossible still, his fellow humans didn't retreat from his position or try to evacuate him. They fought harder, as if the sight of their bleeding comrade only strengthened their resolve. The battle raged for hours. Zethka watched human after human take wounds that should have been fatal, only to keep fighting. They didn't just endure injury, they seemed to grow more dangerous as they bled. A human female with a shattered leg used her broken bone as a weapon. A male with half his face burned away by acid picked up explosives and walked calmly into a group of Zarathi, detonating them all. But it was more than just their refusal to die. The humans fought with an intelligence that adapted constantly. When their ammunition ran low, they scavenged Zarathi weapons. When their formations broke, they formed new ones instantly. When their equipment failed, they improvised solutions that violated every principle of military doctrine, yet somehow worked. A human sergeant, bleeding from dozens of wounds, stood atop a pile of Zarathi corpses and began laughing. Not the laugh of madness, but something worse. The laugh of someone who had found joy in the face of certain death. Other humans heard it and began laughing too, even as they fought for their lives. Zethka realized he was witnessing something beyond courage or skill. This was a species that had learned to weaponize its own mortality. They didn't fight despite the certainty of death, they fought because of it. Each human seemed to carry within them the accumulated fury of billions of years of evolution, every ancestor who had refused to submit to extinction. The sun was setting when the last Zarathi fell. Of the 300 humans, fewer than 50 remained standing. Most of those were wounded. All of them were covered in blood, their own and their enemies'. They should have been traumatized, broken by the horror of what they had endured. Instead, they were checking on their wounded and making jokes. Zethka descended from his observation post, his legs unsteady. The human commander approached him, one arm hanging useless at her side, her armor destroyed, her face streaked with blood and dirt. She should have been in shock, dying, defeated. She was smiling. "Observer," she said, somehow knowing his title. "I hope you got what you needed for your report." Zethka looked across the battlefield, trying to process what he had witnessed. 30,000 Zarathi warriors lay dead or dying. 300 humans had accomplished what entire Federation fleets had failed to do. "I don't understand," he managed to say. "Your species has no natural armor, no enhanced healing, no telepathic coordination. You use primitive weapons and outdated tactics. By every metric, you should have been extinct before you developed space travel." The commander's smile widened, showing teeth stained with blood. "You're thinking about it wrong, observer. You're looking at what we don't have instead of what we do have." "Which is?" She gestured to her surviving soldiers, who were now singing something in their native language while they tended to their wounded. "We have the one thing no other species in your Federation possesses. We have the absolute, unshakable certainty that we will keep fighting no matter what. Other species fight until they're defeated. Humans fight until they're dead, and sometimes we're too stubborn to stay dead even then." Zethka stared at her, beginning to understand why the Zarathi, who had never known fear, had started retreating in the final hour of battle. "Your report will say we're suitable for alliance?" the commander asked. "I'm not sure," Zethka replied honestly. I need to determine whether the Federation is ready for humanity." The commander laughed, the same terrifying laugh he had heard during the battle. Observer: "We've been ready for the Federation since we first looked up at the stars and decided they belong to us too." As Zeth-Ka returned to his ship to begin his report, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The Federation had rules, protocols, civilized ways of conducting warfare. Humanity was about to shatter all of them, not through malice, but through the simple fact that they existed. He began to understand why even death itself might fear a species that refuse. 3 standard months after the Kepler 442b incident, Zeth-Ka stood before the Federation High Council, his report complete, but his understanding still fragmenting. The crystalline chamber buzzed with translated voices from dozens of species, each representative more disturbed than the last by what he had witnessed. "Impossible!" declared Council Prime Vaith-Ara, her tentacles writhing in agitation. "No species can sustain such casualties and maintain combat effectiveness. Your observations must be flawed." Zeth-Ka activated the holographic display, showing the battle's final statistics. 87% casualties, complete mission success, 0 retreats or surrenders, even among the mortally wounded. The Krathan representative, General Thek Moore, leaned forward in his crystal exosuit. "Our own projections indicated the humans would be overrun within the first hour. How did they achieve this outcome?" "That's what troubles me," Zeth-Ka replied. "They didn't win through superior technology or tactics. They won because they redefined what victory means. For humans, victory isn't about surviving the battle. It's about ensuring their enemy doesn't survive it either." The debate continued for hours. Some council members argued for immediate military alliance with humanity. Others, particularly the more ancient species, counseled extreme caution. The Vorthak ambassador spoke for many when she said, "A species that weaponizes its own extinction instinct is too dangerous to trust." During a recess, Zeth-Ka received an encrypted message that changed everything. The Federation's deep space monitoring stations had detected something that violated every principle of galactic law. Humans were expanding. Not just expanding, conquering. While the Council debated their worthiness for alliance, humanity had somehow obtained faster-than-light travel and was establishing colonies at an unprecedented rate. More shocking still, they weren't following standard colonization protocols. They were terraforming worlds that other species had deemed uninhabitable, turning poison atmospheres into gardens, converting frozen wastelands into thriving settlements. The message included footage from the Tau Ceti system, where humans had encountered the Devourers. Zeth-Ka had never seen a Devourer in person, and hoped he never would. They were one of the galaxy's oldest nightmares. Entities of pure hunger that consumed not just flesh, but the very essence of life itself. Entire star systems had been declared off-limits after Devourer infestations. The Federation's standing policy was simple. If you encounter Devourers, you run. Humans had encountered them 3 weeks ago. The footage showed human ships, crude, boxy vessels that looked like flying scrapyards, facing off against Devourer bioships. The aliens were creatures of living shadow that could phase through matter and drain the life force from entire crews in minutes. Standard doctrine was to evacuate the system and request a Federation cleansing fleet. Instead, the humans had done something unthinkable. They had boarded the Devourer ships. Zeth-Ka watched in horrified fascination as human soldiers, wearing nothing but modified spacesuits and carrying improvised weapons, forced their way aboard vessels that were literally alive and hungry. The camera feed showed a human female, her suit's life support already failing from proximity to the Devourers, calmly placing explosive charges while shadow creatures tried to drain her essence. She was singing. Not a war cry or a prayer, but something soft and gentle, Her bio signs showed she was dying. The devourers were successfully feeding on her life force, but she kept moving, kept working, kept singing. When the charges detonated, taking out the bioship's nervous system, her final act was to give a thumbs up to her camera feed. The humans had killed 17 devourer ships using boarding tactics that should have been suicide. Their casualties were total. Every boarding party died. But they had accomplished something the Federation had never managed. They had stopped a devourer swarm through direct assault. The footage ended with human reinforcements arriving to find a graveyard of devourer bioships and the scattered remains of their own people. Instead of mourning or retreating, they began salvaging devourer technology and setting up a permanent base in the system. Zeth-Ka realized the Council needed to see this immediately. When he presented the new evidence, the chamber fell silent. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed to quiet in response to what they had witnessed. "They're not just fearless," whispered the Manthari representative, her compound eyes reflecting the holographic death. "They're contagious." It was true. The footage showed human crews working alongside Federation refugees who had been trapped in the system. Beings who should have been paralyzed with terror were following human orders, adopting human tactics, even singing human songs as they worked to fortify their position against future devourer attacks. "How do they do it?" asked Council Prime Vith Ara. "How do they make others willing to die alongside them?" Zeth-Ka had been studying human cultural files, trying to understand their psychology. They have a concept called hope, not the statistical probability of success that we use in tactical planning, but something more fundamental. They believe that as long as one human remains alive, all possibilities remain open. The Zarathi observer, recently arrived from Kepler 442b, added his own perspective. "After our defeat, we sent scouts to observe human activity on the planet. They're not just rebuilding, they're improving everything they touch. They've turned our burial grounds into gardens. They've transformed our weapons into tools for construction. They make death itself serve life." General Thekmore stood slowly, his crystal armor chiming. "We need to make a decision. Do we offer them alliance, or do we prepare for war?" "War?" Zeth-Ka stared at the Krathan general. "You would fight a species that treats extinction as a tactical option?" "Better to fight them now, while we still outnumber them," Thekmore replied. "In 50 cycles, they'll have colonies throughout the rim. In 100, they'll have reached the core worlds. They expand like a virus, transforming everything they encounter." The debate resumed, but Zeth-Ka found himself thinking about something else. A conversation he'd had with that human commander before leaving Kepler 442b. "Observer," she had said, "I want you to understand something about my species. We're not trying to conquer the galaxy. We're trying to save it." "Save it from what?" "From death, from entropy, from the idea that anything has to end just because it seems impossible to continue." At the time, he had thought she was speaking metaphorically. Now, watching the footage of humans singing as they died to stop the devourers, he began to understand she had been completely literal. Humans weren't just fighting individual battles. They were fighting the concept of defeat itself. A priority alert interrupted his thoughts. New footage was coming in from the outer rim, something that made the devourer incident look minor by comparison. The signal was from the Andromeda Contact Station, the Federation's most distant outpost. The automated message was simple. "Unknown vessels approaching. Requesting immediate assistance. Signal ends." That had been 6 hours ago. The station's quantum beacon had gone dark immediately afterward, which meant either total communication failure or complete annihilation. Emergency protocols demanded a full investigation fleet, but the nearest Federation ships were days away. Then the long-range sensors detected something impossible. Human ships were already there. How they had traveled that distance so quickly was a mystery, The quantum drive signatures showed technology that shouldn't have existed, engineering that defied several physical laws. But the ships were definitely human, and they were broadcasting on Federation emergency channels. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Defense Force. We have secured Andromeda Contact Station and are providing humanitarian assistance to survivors. Please note that this system is now under human protection." The transmission included tactical data that made the council chamber erupt in shocked voices. The attackers had been something worse than devourers, entities the humans designated as reality weavers, beings that could rewrite local physics to unmake matter itself. The Federation had no weapons effective against such creatures. The humans had improvised new ones. Zeth Ka watched the battle footage with growing amazement. Human ships had somehow modified their engines to create localized reality anchors, preventing the weavers from altering physics in their immediate vicinity. Then they had done what humans always did. They had boarded the enemy vessels and killed them in close combat. But this time was different. This time, they hadn't died. The footage showed human soldiers moving through reality weaver ships that existed in folded space-time, fighting creatures made of living mathematics. They were using weapons that fired crystallized time and shields that bent causality itself. When one soldier was hit by a reality-altering attack that tried to erase him from existence, he simply refused to be erased and kept fighting. "Impossible," breathed the Manthari representative. "No biological entity can resist reality manipulation." "Unless," Zeth Ka said slowly, "their will to exist is stronger than the force trying to erase them." The human commander's final report was even more disturbing than her tactical success. "We've secured 17 reality weaver vessels and are reverse engineering their technology. Estimated time to full understanding, 36 hours. We've also established communication protocols with the entities and negotiated a mutual non-aggression pact." Council Prime Vith Ara's tentacles had gone completely rigid. "They negotiated with beings of pure entropy?" "It gets worse," Zeth Ka said, reviewing the complete files. "The reality weavers are asking to join the human colonial fleet." The chamber fell silent again. In all of galactic history, no one had ever converted a hostile force of reality manipulators into allies. The implications were staggering. "Vote," declared Council Prime Vith Ara, "all in favor of immediate alliance with humanity." Every hand, tentacle, claw, and appendage in the chamber rose. As the council dispersed to prepare for humanity's formal induction into the Federation, Zeth Ka remained behind, studying the data streams still coming from human space. They were building something out there, not just colonies or fleets, but something that defied categorization. They were building hope on a galactic scale. And for the first time in his long life, Zeth Ka began to believe that perhaps death itself might finally have met its match, to accept any limitation, any defeat, any ending that they hadn't chosen for themselves. The humans were coming to the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. One cycle after humanity's admission to the Federation, Zeth Ka received the assignment he had been dreading, a deep reconnaissance mission to the human homeworld of Earth. The Council wanted to understand what had shaped this impossible species, what forces had forged beings capable of making the universe itself bend to their will. The journey to Sol System revealed the first clues. Human space wasn't just colonized. It was alive in ways that defied biological understanding. Dead planets had become garden worlds. Asteroid belts had been transformed into vast manufacturing complexes where humans worked alongside machines that seemed to possess their own will. Most disturbing of all, the space between worlds hummed with energy patterns that registered as something approaching consciousness. Humans weren't just terraforming worlds, they were awakening the cosmos itself. Earth appeared on his sensors like a blue-green jewel wrapped in a web of light. The orbital stations weren't just defensive platforms, but massive libraries containing the preserved essence of every species humanity had encountered, including the memories of those who had died fighting beside them. The humans had somehow found a way to make death itself temporary. Zeth Ka's ship was met by an escort of vessels that shouldn't have been able to fly. They were built from materials that included crystallized starlight, compressed time, and what his sensors identified as weaponized nostalgia. The lead ship was commanded by someone he recognized from the Kepler 442b footage, the boy who had fought with acid eating through his chest. But he wasn't a boy anymore, and by all readings, he shouldn't have been alive. "Welcome to Sol, Observer Zeth Ka," came the transmission from Captain Marcus Webb, whose biosignature registered as simultaneously dead and vibrantly alive. "The director is waiting to speak with you." The director turned out to be the female commander from Kepler 442b, now bearing the title Humanity's Voice to the Infinite. She met him in a chamber that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously, a room where the laws of physics served humanity rather than the reverse. "You have questions," she said, offering him a chair that adjusted itself to his physiology without being asked. "I can see them in your quantum resonance. You want to understand what we're building." "Your species defies classification," Zeth Ka replied. "You've gone beyond evolution, beyond technology. You're rewriting the fundamental rules of existence." The director smiled, and in that expression, Zeth Ka saw something that chilled him to his core. Infinite patience, coupled with absolute determination. "We're not rewriting the rules, Observer. We're teaching the universe that it was never as limited as it thought." She gestured, and the walls became transparent, revealing the true scope of human achievement. Sol System wasn't a solar system anymore. It was a machine. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid had been converted into components of something vast and purposeful. The sun itself had been modified, its fusion carefully controlled to power processes that made energy from quantum vacuum fluctuations and temporal paradoxes. "What are you building?" Zeth Ka whispered. "A backup plan," the director replied simply. "For everything." She led him deeper into the structure, past chambers where humans worked alongside beings he didn't recognize. Entities of pure mathematics, living concepts, and creatures that existed between the spaces of atoms. In one room, he saw a human child teaching a reality weaver how to play something called hopscotch. The cosmic entity was laughing with genuine joy. "You see, Observer, every species we've encountered has eventually accepted limitations. They reach a point where they say, 'This is impossible, so we won't attempt it.' Humans are different. When we encounter something impossible, we make it possible through sheer bloody-minded refusal to accept defeat." They paused at an observation deck overlooking the project's core, a massive sphere that seemed to contain folded space-time itself. Streams of energy flowed into it from across the galaxy, carrying something more precious than matter or energy. "Memories," the director explained. "Every moment of joy, every act of courage, every small kindness that ever was or ever could be. We're preserving it all against the ultimate extinction." Zeth Ka stared in growing horror and amazement. "You're building a weapon against entropy itself." "Not a weapon, a promise." The director's voice carried the weight of species-level determination. "When the last star dies, when the universe grows cold and empty, when entropy finally claims its victory, humans will still be here, and will restart everything." The scope of the revelation staggered him. Humanity wasn't just conquering worlds or defeating enemies. They were preparing to outlive the universe itself, to become the seeds of new realities when this one ended. "The entities you call death," the director continued, "visited us early in our space exploration phase. They expected to find another species that would eventually accept their dominion. Instead, they found beings who looked at the heat death of the universe and said, "That's just another problem to solve." She activated a holographic display showing humanity's true expansion pattern. It wasn't random colonization. It was a carefully orchestrated network of reality anchors, each human settlement serving as a node in a galaxy-spanning consciousness that was slowly awakening the cosmos to its own potential for transcendence. "Death fears us because we've made their work temporary," the director explained. "Every being that dies alongside humans, every species that joins our cause, every moment of existence we preserve, it all goes into the archive. When the universe ends, we'll simply build a new one and invite everyone back." Zethka watched the data streams flowing between star systems, carrying the preserved essences of billions of beings. The Zorathi warriors who had died on Kepler 442b were there, still fighting in simulated battles, perfecting their arts for the day they would be needed again. The reality weavers had contributed their understanding of cosmic mathematics. Even the devourers had been reformed and were now working to preserve life rather than consume it. "But the energy requirements," he began, "are infinite." "Yes." The director's smile widened. "Good thing we're powered by hope, which is also infinite. Every human child who looks at the stars and dreams of touching them adds to our energy reserves. Every impossible thing we accomplish makes the next impossible thing a little easier." In the distance, Zethka could see human children playing in zero-gravity chambers alongside young beings from dozens of species. They were laughing together, teaching each other games that bent local physics and creating art from crystallized starlight. These children would grow up in a universe where death was temporary, where extinction was negotiable, and where the impossible was just another engineering challenge. "Your observers want to know why even death fears humanity," the director said, reading his thoughts with technology that made telepathy obsolete. "It's simple. Death depends on beings accepting that endings are permanent. We've made endings optional." She led him to the final chamber, where a single human sat in meditation, surrounded by swirling patterns of energy that registered as pure possibility. The being was ancient, older than any human should have been able to survive, yet somehow still vital and growing. "Our first volunteer," the director explained. "She's been dead for 3 centuries, but she refused to stay that way. She's currently negotiating with the fundamental forces of reality to establish new ground rules for existence itself." The ancient human opened her eyes, which held the light of newborn stars. "Hello, observer," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made Zethka's equipment register readings beyond its capacity. "Would you like to see what we're really building?" Before he could answer, reality shifted around them. They were no longer on Earth, no longer in Sol system. They stood in a space between universes, where the work of eons was nearly complete. Vast structures of crystallized will and weaponized hope stretched beyond the horizon of possibility. Humans and their allies worked in dimensions that didn't have names, constructing the foundation of what would become the next iteration of existence. "When this universe dies," the ancient human explained, "we'll be ready, not just to survive, but to improve on the original design. Less entropy, more possibilities, better rules for love and laughter, and the stubborn refusal to surrender that makes life worth living." Zethka understood now why his equipment had registered such strange readings from human space. They weren't just building technology. They were building new laws of physics. They were preparing to bootstrap an entire cosmos that would be more resistant to decay, more supportive of life, more compatible with hope. "Death fears us," the director said as reality reformed around them, returning them to the observation deck, "because we've proven that their victory is only temporary. Every ending becomes a new beginning. Every defeat teaches us how to win next time. Every death shows us how to make life more permanent. As Zethka prepared to return to Federation space with his report, the director handed him a small device that hummed with potential energy. "For your ship," she explained. "It will let you tap into the archive. If you're ever in real danger, if death comes for you personally, just activate it. We'll come for you no matter how far, no matter how impossible the rescue seems." "Why?" he asked. "Why extend this protection to an alien observer?" The director's smile was gentle, but absolutely implacable. "Because you witnessed humanity's first real victory. You saw us bleed and keep fighting. That makes you family, and humans never abandon family. Not to death, not to impossible odds, not to the end of everything." As Zethka's ship departed Sol system, his sensors detected something that would haunt him forever. The laughter of human children, somehow propagating across interstellar space on quantum frequencies, carrying a message that reached every corner of the galaxy. Death itself, it seemed, had learned to listen to that laughter with something approaching fear. The universe was about to discover what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object, and the immovable object decided to become unstoppable too. Humanity hadn't just joined the galactic community. They had made the entire cosmos complicit in their magnificent refusal to accept any limitation, any ending, any defeat as permanent. In his final report to the Federation Council, Zethka wrote, "Recommendation: Full alliance with humanity. Alternative recommendation: Prepare for the most beautiful apocalypse in the history of existence." The galaxy would never be the same. More importantly, it would never end the same way again. Humanity had seen to that.